Welcome to Scale Your Empire, the podcast that elevates your business game. Meet your guides to greatness. Your hosts, Darshan and Rejin.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Scale Your Empire. And we have a very special guest today, Josh Wheeler, all the way from America. We're going to get a different accent this time, that's for sure. So Josh is a father, entrepreneur, and an investor, and he's got an amazing story. He was in the family business for almost 25 years before he decided to branch out himself. And he has built a very successful marketing business by himself since then. And love to hear your story, Josh, and talk about your experience in scaling. And looking forward to the chat, my friend. And welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. We really appreciate it.
Amazing. Man, look, we always start the podcast with a very simple question. So most businesses, before they scale, there is a period where they want to scale, but they don't really scale the business. Something is stopping them. It could be a mindset. It could be, it's different for everybody. So what was that for you, where something was stopping you from really scaling?
I think that there's a lot of things to unpack whenever you have a question like that, because it is a bit of a loaded question. I think whenever you start looking at it, there's a blend of things between how you feel about money, right? And what's your kind of like your money blueprint and what you're willing to risk. I think your risk tolerance comes into that as well. And I think that there's an element of what people expect of you, right? And what you think people expect of you that might hold you back for one reason or another. So I think that, and I'll just speak from my experience, coming out of a family business and kind of starting that journey over. Obviously, we had some good skill sets of things that we could go ahead and do. Most of the growth that we'd have. And so we actually ended up, whenever I got out of the family business, we had actually ended up selling the business anyway. And, so it was okay because I already had those marketing skill sets that we were able to shift into something else relatively quickly. But I can tell you there were some hard times in terms of just getting started, to where it's like you run into imposter syndrome in terms of, I don't even can I even do this? Can I even help people? Can I deliver what I say I can? And I think it takes a little bit of time, no matter how successful you are, no matter how fast you grow. I think that there's an element of those things that are happening as well, to where it's just the uncertainty of like, when is this whole thing going to fall apart? Right? When is am I good enough? So I would say that the biggest component for me was just getting over the mindset of those different things to say, so for example, money. I grew up in an area that a lot of people, no matter where you're at in the world, you find are lower income, or like that is just the experience that you have. Right. And so when you look at that, sometimes you say, okay, money is not readily available. So I have to hold on to what it is that I have. So we're not going to risk it. We're not going to put it or invest it into things. And I think at the very beginning part of my journey, at least by myself, when we were building the marketing agency, was that I have to let go and hire people, because you can't do things by yourself. So that's number one. Number two, you just have to say, hey, you're going to make this back and be confident in what it is that you're doing. And number three, sometimes getting over that hump of, am I good enough? I think those are the big things for me that I had to take on directly in order to be where I needed to be successful. And I think that the moment, and it was probably right before COVID, or maybe going into COVID, where a lot of things were locking down. I think for one reason or another, we had a lot of time to work on ourselves. Right. And so the difference between 2015 and 2020, and from 2020 until now, being 3 to 4 years out of it, has been a substantially different experience, because we had a little bit of time to work through those things. Now, it wasn't fortunate that how it had to happen. I hate it had to happen that way. But for me personally, I'm glad that we're in a space that we are, because we were able to work through those things.
100%, my friend. Yeah. And look, one of the things, you got a unique scenario where you were in the family business. And I'm sure there's a lot of our listeners who might be in the same boat, where when you're in a family business, you have a bit of a safety net, because it's family. Then you go out by yourself, and there is a lot of doubts, I'm sure, in your head. Like, am I good enough? Can I do this? What about the finances? So was there anything you had to do to overcome all those doubts and insecurities?
I read a lot. And then we started putting it into practice. Now you've heard from time to time that you fake it until you make it. I don't, so it's like all of us start there to some degree, but I think you just got to do it. And you kind of start filling in those shoes, right? So I never took the approach of fake it till you make it. We just said, okay, I'm going to do enough of this. I'm going to take enough action. We're going to do enough volume of activity in order to kind of work through that. Now, when COVID did hit, it gave us the opportunity to kind of look at our personal growth and development and really take a step back to say, okay, well, like, here's where I'm at. Here's where I would like to go. What is that map look like? And I think that a lot of times people don't stop long enough to be able to develop that map, right? Like if you were starting, in Sydney and you were going someplace, if you didn't know where you were going, where would you start? So, and I think that taking a good inventory of who you are, what you're about, getting your core values in place. We're all familiar with core values in business, but why don't you have core values as a person, right? So I think that as you start working through those and can define those, that is you taking, okay, here's where we're starting from now. Where are we going? Well, if I told you that I want to have $1 million agency, number one, how long is that going to take? And number two, how am I going to get there? Where are my gaps? And I think that we had to go through that process first. And now, knowing what I know now, I would have done it in 2015. Where are we at? Where are our gaps to be there? What do I need to be in order to be, and not just identify, but my identity is a multi-million-dollar digital marketing agency owner. What does that look like and who does that need to be? So then that allowed me to start, again, working on the skills because I couldn't go out. We couldn't go anywhere or do anything. Now, we had the opportunity to continue to work because most of us are digital anyway, but it did give me the time to step back and say, okay, let's map this process out a little bit better. I mean, that's how I got through it, was just studying and reflecting, and then taking action on what those things were.
Amazing, Josh. You mentioned something really important, especially for business owners. In the beginning, you told that you had to let go of the control and start hiring more people. All right. Because
Yes.
most business owners are not able to make the transition. So what was the trigger for you? What made you decide that, I need to really let go of hire more people so that I can scale my agency and my business? What was the trigger?
Well, I'll tell you the very first thing. I need to tell you a story that whenever we sold the family business, so we did signage, custom apparel, promotional items like the branded pins and mugs and that kind of stuff. That's what we focused on. When we sold the business, we had at any given time of the year 25 to 35 employees. And when we sold that company, I said, never again will I ever have to deal with any employees whatsoever. Like I really had an adversarial relationship to employees to be like, this is stupid. I'm not an adult daycare. Like I'm not taking care of all these people just for the fun of it. So for a long time, it's like, that's how I ran the business. Guess what? You hit a wall, right? You hit a wall to be like, well, this is part of the process of when do you start hiring more people? Well, it's when truthfully, you have to come to that conclusion on your own to say, I can't do any more here and I would like more. How do I make more? Right. So because at that time, I still had a lot of reservations about money. And that's really the biggest reason why we weren't hiring a lot of people, is because it's like, I want to keep more of it. What you find out is if you make the right hires, that's just an investment to multiply your money anyway. Right. So there is a put this much in, you're going to get this much out kind of equation if you run the process right. So the first person I got started with, we just hired a VA out of the Philippines. At the time, it was like $400, right? And the minute that I realized that it was like $400 US, number one, at that rate, it was actually doing a lot for somebody, right? Now in the US, I'm sure where you guys are at, that, standards of living, cost of living, all that stuff is quite a bit higher. So when you go to other parts of the world to be able to do that, now maybe some of your listeners can't go that remote route. That's a benefit of having that particular type of business model. But whenever you go through and you come to a point where, okay, I'm just going to hire somebody to take care of my email, right? And just to make sure that everything gets taken care of there. When that was taken care of and I didn't have to worry about it, I could now spend another 2 hours a week or so. It's probably more than that, but let's just say it was 2 hours a week on doing something else at a higher revenue rate. So you've seen I can't even remember the first person I heard this from, but it's like, okay, we were doing $200 an hour work. Okay, now I can focus on what does $500 an hour work look like? And then we replace those 2 hours to go there. And then, okay, so that gave me a lot of optimism that we could make this happen. Now, it's a little bit of a setback when you hire somebody and they don't work out, or it was a really bad situation or something. You're just like, I don't know, maybe we should change what we're doing here. But ideally, most of the time, I think that if people line up with your core values of your company, so that's another big thing that I usually talk to people about, is that when you're scaling, people that are coming on board into your company need to know what you're about. Otherwise, like if you are expecting them to act like you or the standard of that you set, but you never told them what the standard was, it's like trying to play a sport but never told the rules. It's like you just had chaos and people running around everywhere, right? So that's one of the very first things that we did whenever we started hiring people in, is making sure that our core values were clearly understood and that every decision. Now, it was interesting because a lot of that took training when things came on. So we actually had to train people on how to think and make decisions based on our core values. So it's really interesting, but there is between the money side and hiring people in and when to know that, there's a pretty good connection point to where what I would say is for most people. So if I give any advice, it's like, if you've got 3 months worth of wages in the bank, so if you're paying a VA from the Philippines $500, get $1,500 in the bank and then put them to work, because that person's going to turn that $1,500 into quite a bit more, right? Or whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just I really love how you're taking it as an investment, all right, but not as an expense. All right, because most of the time, if you look at business owners, they think that hiring someone remote can be an expense. And as you mentioned, let me keep as much money to myself as possible. Whereas when you find the right person, this can be the biggest investment ever for you.
Yes. And it's not as near as expensive as what you think about. So here's what I've come to know. So looking at this 5 years later, whenever we're really hitting on all cylinders, even if you're a local business, because that's where we were a local sign company, right? We made signs to go on the walls for businesses to let people know that we were here. Right. Even now, whenever I'm looking at that, I could have hired a VA for $400 just to follow up on overdue invoices or to do some bookkeeping. They don't have to be there physically face to face with somebody. You can hire somebody remote, usually for a better cost, like and take advantage of the global workforce. Because I'll tell you the other thing that's interesting. Like, of course, most of us will look at Americans and like we're all egotistical and we're like, we all have big heads and we're all Donald Trump, right? That's what people probably think most of the time. But what I would say is that whenever you have a chance to experience how other people work and how other cultures are. So I'll give you a perfect example. When we started hiring from the Philippines, a lot of our staff come out of the Philippines. What's interesting is, and you can go look this up, that there's something that is called the World Power Index. And basically what it is like how people deal with conflicts in different cultures. Like, so the Philippines, for example, they're like on a 40, like a low 40 number. The US is like a high 80, like if we're westernized type countries, we don't mind conflict, right? It's okay. But what that means is that you have to be able to go through and reconcile what that means. So when we were hiring people out of the Philippines, if you were wrong, so I would meet with people, I was wrong, they knew it, but they would never say anything because they don't want conflict. We actually had to go in and say, listen, if you know that I'm wrong and you don't tell me I'm wrong, I'm going to fire you, because that's like it's not a lie, but it's abdication, right? So it's like you've got it. So sometimes that's the only interesting part to me, is that in a world where you can hire anybody from anywhere now, it's like those are some of the little things that will help the process out. So if you're looking to scale through staffing, where you guys are at, we end up having, because our business model, we work out of the UK, the States, Canada, and then we've got clients in Australia and down that way. So whenever we have to go through, we hire people out of South Africa to handle kind of like the UK parts. We'll hire people out of Colombia or Venezuela or those types of places to handle a lot of the US based hours. And then our Philippine staff obviously is pretty close on hours there. So it just gives you a lot of flexibility to be able to go through and do what you need to do. And you don't have to have a business like ours. Like if you're a local auto repair shop, you could use somebody just as effectively. If you're a real estate investor that needs people to do research, you can use it, right? And that's what makes it so nice, is that technology has allowed us to be able to do those things to help in that scaling process.
That's absolutely 100% we agree, because that's just such an awesome resource. The global workforce is such an amazing resource. It's a shame that most people don't really use those businesses, but it's changing now. More and more people are embracing that part, which is great to see. I just want to also quickly touch on the core values. You mentioned core values, so did you create that even before you started the business, or in the early days, or you did that along the way?
No, we do what most people do, and we just kind of like, oh, today we're going to do this. I would say that flying by the seat of your pants, right? It's just kind of like winging it, whatever. And until like we got into the point that we were going to start hiring people, even when we started hiring people, we really didn't have it set up in place. My first two people that we had, I sat down with them and we kind of created that, right? To say, who do we want to be? Who do we want to be seen as? Because sometimes, and most of the time, your core values isn't about business. Your core values is about how you're going to act. But one of our top core values is share the love of God with everybody that we do business with, so that they see that type of persona in us. Now, not everybody has to believe those things. That's fine. Not everybody in our company has to believe those things. But I find it very interesting, a lot of biblical principles that you can apply in business, whether you believe it or not, that end up being good. Some people look at the golden rule, treat other people like you want to be treated. Like there's some interesting things there. But at the end of the day, who is it that you are and who is it that you're going to be? You don't have to believe in if you're more of a faith-based driven. If you're not going that direction, you need to look at the organization, I think, is more of a person and what interaction should the customer have with us? If they were doing business with a person, how should they feel whenever they are completed their business or whatever? And I think if you do that, there's two things that happen. Number one, I think very quickly people can identify who they want to do business with because these are the types of people we do business with, right?
Yes.
Number two, it gives us a way to get everybody on board. So, from a culture standpoint, that's probably been one of the more difficult things that we've had to deal with as we've added people in, is trying to get them all aligned and on board. Like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this or you can recognize this, but like whenever I say dealing with employees is like herding cats, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable annoying. So this whole process has allowed us to be in line. Okay, so we use our core values at our company on how to make decisions, right? So we've got to like be truthful even if it hurts, right? Tell the truth, be honest. That's probably our big things. It's the only thing that I have a zero tolerance for. If I find out one of my employees lies, if the trust is broken, you're fired, done. Because it's the trust that customers put in you, the trust that your teammates are putting in to you, it's a big deal. So I think whenever you go in and you can do that from the beginning, those are probably going to change at some point in some time as you decide who you're going to do business with. Marketing is an interesting business because you get, usually in the beginning, everything's like an hourglass, right? You go wide at the very beginning and you're like, oh, I'm working with all these different industries and all these different people. And then as you go, it kind of narrows down and you start figuring out who do I want to work with or what are the people that I like. And then after that, it starts to narrow back out or it starts to come back out again because now you're going to add different services and that kind of stuff to go wider with that particular niche. But until you start working with people or until you start getting into that mode, you may not know exactly how they want to interact. And quite frankly, you may decide that you don't like these types of people, not because you don't like them, but it's just like, I don't want to work that way. So it's a little interesting to where it should probably be done as you're getting going, even if it's just you. Like even for ours, we've adapted ours a little bit as we go. Usually once a year, we'll sit down and like, okay, are all of these things still true? And are we doing business this way? And at that moment, we can decide as a team, let's keep them the same, but let's get back to what we were doing, or we can adapt and adjust. So we actually do a yearly review. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with EOS,
Yes.
but EOS is something we put in place, and our buddy Lynn Askin is an EOS implementer, and he helps us kind of work through that entire process on our annual planning. And it's like just that piece of things has been a huge game changer whenever it comes to our staff and our culture. But to me, that's the hardest part of hiring team and getting them going in the right direction. And I think core values is a start. Core value and mission, really.
Yeah, great point, man. We've been using the scaling up strategy, but EOS is something we're thinking about as well. But again, regarding the core values, I heard an interesting story about, thousands of years ago when there were all these thousands of tribes, and the tribes which had the strongest core values were the most successful eventually. So, as entrepreneurs, if you think about it, actually what we're doing is building a tribe of people. And if you have strong core values and strong systems, I think that's going to be a very successful tribe. So yeah, that's a really good point, actually.
And the way that you can actually look at that now in current ages is I always go back to this. The U.S. was started from a group of people that were disgruntled and like, we're going to break away from this. The U.S. was great for 250 years because we had a core set of values that we followed to like, okay, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. and we focus on that. When we started getting away from that core focus and that core things, then we start seeing all kinds of other craziness starting to happen. One thing that is like from a core value standpoint, you look at where China's at right now. 100 years ago, that's not where they were. But when they put their 100-year plan in place that they're still implementing right now, that to me is the same thing as having a core value that like, listen, this is what we do and this is how we do it and this is where we're going to go. Now that's coming from a country standpoint, but those are two, I think, firm examples of what happens when you have core values and you lose core values, or you lose that sense of collective forward motion.
Great example. Yeah.
Cool, Josh. Yeah, we just implement so much core values in our business as well. And yeah, I can't deny the importance of it. Josh, another very important thing. When we start business, all right, when we are trying to scale as well, we all make a lot of mistakes. All right. So what has been some of the biggest mistakes you have done while growing your business, and what did you learn from it? What was the feedback? What was the learning from that?
Okay. Now, number one, if you start a business, there's usually not one mistake that you're going to find. That's like, listen, it's going to be littered with all sorts of things, right? I would say that probably one of the biggest things that I was challenged with and it's really kind of an ongoing problem, or it's an ongoing thing that everybody or most people will have to contend with, is as you add people and as you scale up, there's the complexity grows. And it's like, so we have a certain way to do things whenever I was just doing them. As I add people into the mix, it gets vastly more complicated to make sure that the communication is all lined out. That's probably one of the biggest mistakes that I didn't do at the very beginning, is anticipate that. Of course, I would have never known any other way, because when we were in a family business, the burden and the blessing of family businesses is that you're in with your family. You can be blunt and honest and to the point. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen Orange County Choppers, but you're throwing chairs at one another. It may not have gotten that bad, but it's like there's some things there that happen. And it's because you can be, hey, I can be blunt, pointed, and you're going to understand what I have to say. And then tomorrow the page is turned because it's family. You can deal with all that stuff. You can't do that whenever you have people that you're hiring in, unless you want a high turnover. And like, you can, like, they're only going to tolerate you as long as what they're going to tolerate. So the biggest mistake is not having that clear viewpoint at the very start to say, okay, this is how we're going to communicate with people, and this is how we're going to make sure that everybody stays on path. So when we talk about communication rhythms, I didn't have a communication rhythm. We met when we needed to meet. There was no consistency. Most of that was because we're absolutely just hammering down, and we're all of us are all over the place. Having that core meeting structure and scheduled time to meet with one another, it doesn't have to be wasted as long as there's an agenda that's in place beforehand. So that's one thing that we have started really doing, is like, okay, we've got certain meeting times that we have, and usually it's department meetings. Like, this may sound like little things to most people, like if you've been in corporate or whatever, like, yeah, meetings are a complete waste of time, and that's kind of how I thought about most of things like that. But no, whenever you use them in a way that's going to be culture building or team building, when it allows yourself to pour into people. I didn't do that until very later on, right? Whenever we started hiring in people. Same thing goes with pouring into people about upskilling them for training and that kind of thing. And it's like, that's the CEO's role. So I'm going to talk about, like, if that's me, I had to step into the CEO role, and I have to be able to lead, and I have to be able to pour into my people. It was very different moving from what I would call small business owner or freelancer or whatever you want to call it into CEO role, because they're two different things. And most people think, oh, I'm CEO and founder and owner. Like, I don't think you can be any of those at the same time, because everything's slightly different. Put it on your business card if you want to, but the CEO is going to be doing something completely different than somebody that is just like, okay, I'm a general manager. Because that's what I was for a long time, was just either freelancer, general manager, and we just didn't have a good sense of communication. And I think that that's one thing to where, if you're scaling up, you want to kind of have a plan for that going into it, because you're going to be adding people, that they're going to be off doing their own thing in their own world. And in order to kind of keep that in tight, and in order to train people's replacements. So it's like, if you're the business owner, do you always want to sit in the chair that's the operations role? Like, okay, like, you're going to put different hats on as you go. If you want to stay in one seat, then okay, stop training people, stop doing all that stuff. But if you want to absolutely scale up and get to a point to where you're now an owner investor instead of, I work in the business, you want to work over top of the business. So it depends on what your goals are on that as well. But communication 100% was the biggest issue that we made, and not having a clear communication plan.
When you say communication, are you talking about not setting the right expectation with people?
I'd say that's part of it for
Yeah.
sure, especially if you don't have a solid employee onboarding process. At the very beginning, when we hired people, it was like, oh, I'm going to get on Online Jobs PH, and it's like, oh, you sound awesome. Like literally,
Mm.
I hired people early on based on how well I could understand them, right? And you
Yeah.
find out that hey, if you want people that can speak good English, go to Cebu or go to some places where all the big call centers are at. So you find these little things out with people. So a little bit of it was setting expectations, but I think it's more about giving people the opportunity to communicate with one another as a team on a regimented basis. It can't be 100% work, right? It's like, so we actually on Fridays, at least once a month, we'll have our pizza party, our Friday pizza parties. And so I send a little bit extra money out to all the people so they can go through it. And then on lunchtime, whenever they have it, they'll turn Zoom on and they'll do whatever it is that they do. It's like those little team building events. That's what I used to do here when we had our other places. Communication is more about the plan of action in meetings and that type of thing, but also keeping people just, again, because we have a remote business, sometimes people can get lost, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't talk to them for days, for weeks. So you have to minimize that in order to make sure that things are going smoothly.
Like, you have a lot of experience running so many marketing agencies, like, marketing companies and everything. So tell us a little bit more about your take on marketing and how did you use some of those concepts to grow your businesses?
And so marketing is the lifeblood of what businesses should be. It's like, I recently in a training that I was setting in with John Logar, right? So I don't know if you guys like, I'm sure you know who he is for what you guys are, but I was sitting on training and he had been talking about a few things that we were able to bring over me. The thing that I took away from his talk was that if you haven't deposited money within 2 days, like, so if it's been more than 2 days and you haven't deposited money into your bank account, then you're not really running a business. Marketing should be having your pipeline filled, should have your sales teams working, all those things. Now, I realize that we're talking about scaling up, that maybe you're the sales guy. Maybe you don't have a sales team. But the fact of the matter is, you got to be going through and be hustling at that part. Now, marketing, I come from a world where I started my marketing training with more direct response marketing with Dan Kennedy and Jay Abraham and some of those guys. And it wasn't digital at that time. So in 2001, there was very, very few things. I think in high school in 97, I built a website on GeoCities. Right. I don't remember, or I don't know if you knows what GeoCities are, what you remember, but it was a while back. Whenever we got into this stuff, I really didn't understand it enough because I started my marketing training to help out with a family business in 2001. By the time that I hit 2008 is really when I got into digital. So Facebook was something that was just right column ads, right? So those little ones that were over here to the side. Facebook changed the world for me because it opened up other opportunities that I would have never considered or ever thought about. And it took a lot of businesses a lot of time to be able to realize what was happening. But all marketing is basically building trust with your market. Most of the time, our businesses, people don't know who we are. Most of the time, our businesses, it's like, I'm not even an option on the table when somebody's trying to choose. So marketing to me, it allows you the ability to become an option, even the smallest business, if you do it well. And there's plenty of marketing agencies that are out there that will actually serve you well. There's also a lot of bad ones, by the way. But marketing is the one thing to where if you make investments into that, it's no different than employees. Like whenever I was introduced and I'm a business owner and investor, right now you can look at me and that's exactly who I'm in, where we invest in our own ads. I don't have to run ads. Like my business model is serving agencies that go and serve other people and businesses. I don't have to run ads because we've got a network of a sales team. I still run ads because if you're not confident in what you're doing and what you're selling, why? Right. So I think that it also gives you the ability to build a scalable infrastructure. One of the things that we're big into is mergers and acquisitions. I think that that's one way that you can scale. There's a lot of different ways you can scale, but mergers and acquisitions is one of them. Right. So we look at that and say, okay, well, what's it going to take if I wanted to sell my business? So I'm going to tell all of you out there that if you're going to retire in the next 10 years, one of the biggest ways that you can multiply the value of your business is by having a client acquisition system in place that does not have you in it. Now, if it doesn't have you in it, now see, the CEO should be the face of the company, should be the leader. They should not be dealing with the marketing at all, right? Marketing team comes to me like, hey, let's go through and do these particular things. Cool, sign off, done. If you don't get to a point that you're there and you don't have to be part of the marketing, then you're going to take a bigger hit on that evaluation, right? And I don't care if it's private equity. I don't care if it's, somebody locally that wants to buy your business. You'll get more if they're not buying a job. And part of the job is the marketing. If it's just sitting there humming along, why wouldn't somebody want that? There's a little ATM cash machine. So I think from a marketing perspective, the way that people need to consider it and look at it is that is the mechanism, right? Now, you may only have $100 a month to be able to market your business. Then use it. Like, it doesn't matter how, because what will happen is, so let's say the business that's local, that they have $100 a month extra to be able to do something with. You take that $100 and you put it into something like Facebook, right? Now you can look at things to get leads and that kind of thing. But in your particular case, you only have $100. You're probably not going to get a huge amount of leads. But what you want to do, you want to notify your local market that you are an option, that you should be somebody they should consider.
Yes.
You get somebody in the door to start testing those things out. That is the one thing that, and I'm not a big awareness person, right? Awareness, you can't deposit awareness in the bank at the beginning. As you grow more eyeballs and as you grow more things, those ads will become multipliers for everything else that you do. Why should I do this? Well, just take a look online and look at all the comments that we have, all that social proof that we have, and it will help the conversion rates on a lot of stuff that you do. So anyway, the marketing is a deep conversation that it could take the full hour just talking about it. But it's something I would just say, listen, if you got $100, do it, right? If you need to eat this month and you can do that on 75, then take the other 25 and go do something with it. But do something. And Facebook ads and some of those platforms are so cheap. I don't say that they're cheap for some industries. If you're a roofer, well, you should probably have more to spend than 25 to $100. But, I don't care what business you are in, it can help impact what it is that you do. And that's one of the only ways you can start. So if you want a little spark to ignite your scaling or your growth, that can be all that you need.
100%
Amazing, Josh.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think you did mention something really important when it comes to marketing is about trust. So what are some of the practical things that business owners can do in their marketing to grow their trust with their customers?
One of the biggest things that I always advocate for, so there's two pieces to this. One, you have to have a business Facebook page. You can probably do this on TikTok and if you prefer those platforms as well. But I like Facebook because the most people are there. So I always try to go first to where the people are. So think Facebook and Instagram. But if you have a business page that's on there, any videos that you post on that page will track. So you can build an invisible audience of people to watch 25% of your videos and then take your $25 and only show it to people who are warmed up, right? So the one thing that I would say is that be making videos. Number one, you can do it for free. And I realize that not everybody likes to get on videos. Look at I got a fat round face. Okay. People don't right. But here's the thing is when you go out and do it, people love the authenticity of getting to know you. And it's the strangest thing. So we used to do in part of our business, and this was probably in the 2016, 2018 range, a lot of political marketing. My job and what my goal was at that time was for people to put enough videos out through Facebook Live and other things that they would be recognized in their local supermarkets or their local grocery stores or markets whenever they went in. And when we started seeing, yes, that's exactly what was happening, it's going to be exactly the same for the business owner themselves. So at the very beginning, you want to try to build a business that you can, that you can excel through. The way that you should do this now is just start making videos. Now, there's a couple content pieces that I'll give to you is that one, people if you have core values, that's one really easy way. Listen, if you believe this and you can't talk about it, then do you really believe it? You really got to ask yourself. So start talking about your core values first. Hey, my name is Josh Wheeler. One of the biggest reasons you should do business with us is because of our core value number 2, tell the truth even when it hurts. Now, from a marketing company perspective, why is it that you should trust somebody like me? And it's because even whenever it makes me look bad, even when I know that you're going to jump down my throat because of whatever it is that we did, you know that I'm still going to tell you the truth. So if you want to go out to some of these other marketing companies that won't do that for you, that's my commitment to you. And anyway, so then you can direct to the website or whatever, but it doesn't take a huge amount of time to be able to communicate those things. Right now, I've been doing videos for a long time, so I can come up with some things like that off the cuff. I probably am talking a little fast because of today's just been bonkers. But whenever you go through that, you can do it too, but it may take a little bit of work. And that's the reason why right now, today, you should go ahead and start making some of those videos to introduce your company. Listen, okay, hey, my name is Josh. I run White Label Ad Factory, and we help agencies maximize their profits by 30 to 35% just by offering new services to your existing clients, right? Yeah. It's super simple. If I just told you, hey, this is what I do. Now, if you're an agency, at least you know, oh, he helps agencies, right? It just starts that way. Now, the very first 10 that you do, 20 that you do, it's going to suck when you look at back from 100. But what I'm going to tell you is if you would commit to doing that for 90 days, it would change your world. any business owners. It changed the world. And then you start saying, okay, well, what are people, we put out 90 days of content. What are people jiving with? What do we see likes and comments and shares? Then I'm going to take that and I'm going to start putting money behind it. Maybe $2 a day, maybe $5 a day. And then I'm going to get more eyeballs to it. And I already know that people like it. So there's little strategies that you can use that won't take a huge amount of money. Like right now, you can do it for free. Just start. Most social is window dressing anyway, because people will see something and then they'll go to your page and then they'll take a look at what you've got going on. So most of it's just window dressing anyway. So don't worry about people being like, number one, people in general, you're going to have some trolls, but in general, most people are kind-hearted and it's like, listen, go try. And whenever you get a little troll, then you can do what Wendy's and all these other people do. And you can troll back a little bit like, hey, thanks for your comments. Appreciate it. Thumbs up. Right. Those little things. So you can't worry about your ego. You can't worry about what anybody else says, because when we all get started, I think there's some variation of, we started our business so that we could have more freedom, that we could give our families the life that they wanted, or be able to do the types of things that they could do. One of the cliche things that we say here is like, I want it to be better than what I had it. Right. Yeah. That's why we start. So if you're going to let somebody else take that away from you, then maybe you shouldn't be in business.
100%.
If you've got the discipline to execute, if you've got the discipline just to make 45 to minute videos telling people who you are, when somebody sees you on the street and they're like, hey, I'm interested in what you got going on, you're going to say, no, I can't talk. When you're looking at that little phone screen or you're looking at whatever there, listen, that's all, you're talking to that person. So if you can't do it, then it's going to be difficult to do it in other places. But those are little things that we do that to get started. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of the framework that we would.
Yeah, there's some really practical good tips.
We're going to shift gears a little bit and go through finance, one of the other major part of scaling business the smart way, and make sure there is enough takeaway at the end of the year, because you don't want to be just in business just to be a charity, right? At the end of the day, you want some takeaway and use that money for your church or whatever you want to do with that, right? So what are your thoughts on finance? Do you have a ritual, a weekly, monthly ritual, and how do you monitor and make sure that you're scaling profitably?
The one thing that we put in place was Profit First. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Profit First foundations or the fundamentals, but basically what it is that you're going to take your part first, and then you're going to operate the business on what's left. Now, depending on how much the business is doing in revenue, will change your percentages of what that is. So currently mine is at 20%, right? So I keep 20%, that's my pay. And then we break it down in the other parts, which is a profit account, a tax account, and an operation account. Right. So we end up taking the profit account. We end up taking the tax account. We actually take it out of our bank and put it somewhere else. So we don't see it just sitting over there doing.
Sorry to stop you there, my friend. Just to make it simple for listeners. We know Profit First. We use that as well. Do you want to just describe in your own words in a very simple way, what is Profit First, about the 3 bank accounts and all that kind of stuff, if you don't mind?
Oh yeah. So Profit First, you have 4 primary accounts that you use, and on certain days of the month, you go through and you sweep those accounts and divide it on like some people call it the old envelope system. Like it's just kind of been updated. So you're just allocating the money at the beginning of the month. If you don't allocate your money, this goes for personal finance too. I'm sure that you guys have seen this. Like if there's personal income that comes in, not allocated, it'll get spent somewhere. Like it's just the nature of how things work. So what we tried to do was to take those 4 bank accounts. And then, so for us, we use a bank called RelayFi that's based out of the US. I guess it's based out of the US. I absolutely had no idea, but it's got automated rules. So whenever a deposit happens, it automatically splits it every single day, right? So I don't just do it on a couple days a month, but usually that's the model, is you split it up, and that keeps you paid, right? So from a financing standpoint, I think that not enough people make it a priority to get paid. I spent that time when we were in our family business. I'll guarantee you that there's been times that it's been lean, that you're looking at Friday and you're like, I have no idea how I'm going to make payroll today. Right. So basically what you do is you work hard, you collect money, you do whatever. My people never went unpaid. Like there was never a time when that happens. And that's just what you do. Now, the other side to that is that there's a lot of, my wife will tell you, there's a lot of lean months that was a little more difficult to be able to interact. And anytime that you've got stress like that, and this doesn't really necessarily have to do with straight the finance, but the pressure that comes with your wife or your spouse or your family, that stress will create in an environment of friction inside of your home. So it's important for you to get paid first before anybody. The king eats first. Okay. Yeah. So, because if you don't, what's it for? Why are you going to keep putting in the work and doing the stuff that you're doing? So the king eats first, and then everything else comes second. Right. So that's been an approach that we took. And it's like, it's not because of greed. It's not because of anything else, but I just feel like I need to take care of me and my family first so that I have the energy and the willpower and all the things that are needed in order to lead the people that we have now. And so if you're in a business where that's not happening and you want to scale, you need to start eating first. Adjust your business to fit that, because I promise you, if you don't, it's going to go someplace. Somebody's going to get it. It might as well be you, since you're taking the risk of doing the things that you're doing.
It's about that discipline as well. Hey, just that discipline every single day, every single month. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So that's that, and I highly recommend profit first to everybody we talk to. It's one of the best strategies out there.
I don't know why more people, honestly, I talk to a lot of people. There's a lot of people that have never heard about it at all. The guy who wrote Mike Michalowicz has the library. Him and Dan Sullivan are like my two top guys whenever it comes to like certain things like that. And Mike Michalowicz has a library of books that like, we've got all of them. They're all sitting right there somewhere. And I'll be honest with you, if it comes to building a team, he actually just released a new book called All In that's really good about talking about building a team and that kind of stuff. But the profit first thing, man, it's life changing. It really, really is.
So Josh, we actually, it's been an amazing chat, my friend. We actually come into the 1 hour mark. So I just want to just wrap up and ask you one question from me and one from Dash, maybe. Okay. One from me is, what is that one thing as a CEO or a director you should be responsible for? By the way, this question, everybody has a different answer. There is no right answers because everybody have their own superpower or the way of thinking. So what's that one thing for you as a CEO you should be focusing on?
If you're so as I define a CEO or director role, which is basically sits right below, like in the C-suite or maybe right below it, your primary responsibility is to pour into your people. Because most of the time, once you get to that top levels, you're strategy driven. The soldiers per se need to be poured into.
Amazing, Josh. That's amazing. One last question from me. All right. If you had to, knowing what you now know, if you had to do something differently, all right, in running your businesses, your agency and everything, what would that be?
Honestly, it's probably going to be, I would probably hire faster, knowing what I know now and just going backwards. I would hire faster. I would reinvest bigger because that allows you to grow. If I was on a growth mindset and I really wanted to do that for whatever reason, whether it's to sell or whatever, that would be the one single thing that I would do in that capacity, because I would have got my $1,500 in the bank account to hire somebody and I would have hired them. And then the next time I get another 1,500, I would have hired the second one and I would hire the third one. I want to have 3 months of salary in the bank and then hire them in. That's on growth. Now, if I wasn't on growth and I was on profit, and that's what I would do, I would probably have changed the model that we run and I would have charged more. So a lot of people sell things they're not good at fulfilling, right? So let's say you're a marketing agency right now. If you're a marketing agency right now and it were me, I would learn to sell and I would be world-class at selling and service. And I would let the ads and the website builds and the SEO and all that other stuff, I would outsource and let other people handle it, because sales doesn't change. Human behavior, for the most part, doesn't change. So you learn one skill set and you learn to do it at a world-class level. I don't have to worry about keeping up with Facebook and the changes that it makes or the Google algorithms or anything like that. And I would say for most businesses, it's going to be very, very similar to that as well. If I was an auto repair shop, I would go in and I would be like, okay, I'm not going to work on Fords and Chevy anymore. I'm only going to work on luxury vehicles with Land Rovers and Mercedes and things that have more expensive tickets. And then I would specialize on it. Right. There's always something that you can align with that, but those were the things that I would probably do different.
So good, Josh. Really, really love it. Yeah. Especially the aspect about how to reinvest back in your business.
Yeah. Critical, I think, at this point.
This has been a brilliant chat, my friend, and we really enjoyed it. Hope you did too. And
Absolutely.
Maybe we should have you back on in a few months' time. Maybe we have more stuff to share, I'm sure. So, Josh, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Josh, if people have to find you, know more about you, where do you think they can reach out to you?
Well, for right now, if you're a marketing agency, we can help you guys out a lot, right? So we do have people and offices in Australia, but whitelabeladfactory.com. That's the quickest way to do. Sign up for a free portal account. It'll give you, we have a self-serve account that you can get into, check our pricing out. For you guys, it may not adapt yet. We were working on some of the things that it would adapt the currencies. So that may not be quite up yet, but That's where you can find everything else about us. And truthfully, if you have any direct questions or anything, you can always look us up on Facebook. It's got my face just like this and like the whole screen. So like you can, so look me up on Facebook or on LinkedIn at Josh M. Wheeler.
Awesome. So good to have you on the show, Josh. It was really powerful. Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks guys for having me on. Appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to Scale Your Empire. Help spread the wisdom by liking and sharing this podcast. And we'd love to hear your views in the comments. Now, go out there, take action, and elevate your empire.